Running late and constantly making excuses to.
I love when the sound doesn't work. It's great. There we go.
So we were on.
Bubbling like pastries, and they scream the worst things in life come free to us, cause we're just under the upper hand. I'm going mad for a couple grams, and she don't wanna go outside tonight. And in a pipe she flies to the motherland, or sells love to another man. It's too cold outside for angels to fly. Angels to fly. Ripped gloves, raincoat, tried to swim, stay afloat. Dry house, wet clothes. Loose change, banknotes, weary-eyed, dry throat. Cool girl, no phone. They say she's in the class 18, stuck in her daydream. Been this way since 18, but lately her face seems.
So full disclosure, never really listened to the lyrics to that song before, so did not know it was about drug addiction until I searched for lists of songs about drug addiction. So there you go. You never know. Alrighty. I'm gonna turn on the good captions here. Alrighty, so just a couple things. One is that even though I have stopped collecting data on my study, there are a whole bunch of students still collecting data. So in particular, Henry is looking for people for his study about learning ASL, and remember you can get extra credit for those, plus it helps out your fellow students. So highly encourage y'all to do that if you can. Other announcements. So Thursday, and I'll try to send an email tomorrow to remind people about this. Thursday, we are not meeting here. We are meeting I think it's technically called the Cove. It is the outdoor space right outside the grill, to meet the puppy raiser. And you get extra credit if you go to the Talk and Blocker auditorium before that and give me a little summary about it. The other thing to keep in mind is just be looking at what's coming up. I think I have 2 groups meeting with me today. So other groups, make sure that you're touching base with me about that. And sorry, I had just an afternoon blankout. But just to go over, basically in this meeting, I give you feedback about like, we really want to flesh this out more, or oh, you probably have too much there. The other thing is to be working on exam 3. I think one person's already done it, so awesome. And then the other like small announcement is we don't have too much time left. It's a little mind-boggling. So we'll have our guest speaker again at the Cove on Thursday, and then we'll have next Tuesday on personality disorders. There will be a week from Thursday. We don't have class because we have the academic symposium. And then we have one more day of class, and then your student presentations are on a Tuesday, the last day of exams at 11:30 a.m. I just saw that Word made that a really specific time, 11:30 and 0 seconds, y'all. So the things you need to do between now and then, if you haven't turned in your media paper, get that in. I graded a whole bunch of those yesterday. Those are such a delight to read. So thank you all for always introducing me to more media that I'm not familiar with. Be doing exam 3. I'll try to post exam 4 within the next couple days, so you have that to work on as well. And then again, we don't have a cumulative final exam. Instead, during our exam time, we're going to do presentations. So plan to be here in person for that. If you cannot be here in person for some reason, make sure you collab with your group about how that's going to work, whether you're going to pre-record your part or whether they're going to zoom you in or what have you. But ideally, everybody should be here in person for those. Let's see. Any questions about anything? Really cool. Well, and then the other thing is to come to class and listen to me talk about drugs, right? Things you never thought Dr. Myers would be talking to you about. So just gonna double check that I haven't missed anybody online. Alrighty. So when we finished off last time, we had talked about all the depressants, right? We talked about all the opioids and sedatives and alcohol. And I thought, you know what? Stimulants are their whole other thing. Let's wait. So these are drugs that increase the activity of the central nervous system rather than decreasing it like depressants. So you get increased blood pressure, heart rate, alertness, your behavior sort of speeds up, and your thinking can race essentially. So the drugs we are going to talk about in this category are cocaine right here, we've got amphetamines, we've got nicotine and caffeine. So again, a mix of things that we all know are not great for us, and then some things that people don't necessarily even think of as potentially addicting substances. Alrighty, so cocaine is on the list of Dr. Myers's don't do these drugs. It can really F you up. It's highly addictive. It's the most powerful natural stimulant known. It's most frequently used by teenagers and young adults. About 5% of high school students have used cocaine within the past year. And approximately 3% of the overall population has become dependent on it at some point in their lives. And I used to act out this clip when I taught this, but I found the actual clip on YouTube. Y'all don't have to deal with my not so great acting, but whenever I teach about cocaine, I think about this clip from the movie Role Models, so.
Well, well, well. If it isn't Mr. Bullshit and Doctor I'm full of shit.
In what way are we full of shit? Which one of us has the PhD?
So how was your first weekend with the boys?
It was great. We did 14 hours. Will you sign our sheets?
Maybe give us a few more just for kicks. Round it up to 50.
Don't you sass me. What, do you think I'm a pushover? You know what I used to eat for breakfast? Cocaine. You know what I used to eat for lunch? Cocaine.
What'd you have for dinner?
Was it cocaine?
I will sign.
It just gets stuck in my head whenever I talk about cocaine. If you haven't seen that movie, it's a great Paul Rudd classic, highly recommended. They are in trouble, and so they have to do community service with a thing like Big Brothers Big Sisters, and Jane Lynch is the supervisor who has to sign off on their hours. So the effects of cocaine, I mean, there's a reason why people do this stuff, right? So it has some effects that people enjoy. So it first causes a euphoric rush, and the person is overwhelmed by feelings of confidence and overall well-being. And then at first it's stimulating this higher centers of the nervous system, making users feel excited, energetic, talkative, and even euphoric. Then as more is taken, it starts to stimulate other centers, including those things we just talked about: heart rate, blood pressure, breathing, physiological arousal. And it causes the effects by releasing dopamine in the brain. And now, like everything else we've talked about, once upon a time, we thought of cocaine as a cure for many things. It was believed not to be problematic and to even have some medicinal value. It became really popular in the latter half of the 19th century. It was thought to be a cure for many things, including depression. So Freud actually did a decent amount of experimentation with cocaine as an antidepressant. It works, but for very short periods of time. And unfortunately, there's some evidence to suggest that Freud himself became addicted to cocaine as a result of his experimentation. He claimed it produced euphoria in his patients. Cocaine was also, and they will deny it, but once upon a time, cocaine was an ingredient in some soft drinks like Coca-Cola. And so here we have some of these, again, ads, cocaine tooth drops, instantaneous care, Burnett's cocaine for the hair. I mean, this makes me think of, my husband has a shampoo that has like menthol and caffeine in it, supposedly, right? Like, this is still a thing. I have a shampoo that like I brought it home when my stylist gave it to me, and I looked it up and I was like, oh, there's CBD in here. I don't think that makes a difference for my hair, but you know what? The shampoo as a whole works, so I'll keep buying it. And then here you see where Coca-Cola used to be sort of advertised more as an energy drink. Tired, then drink Coca-Cola. It relieves exhaustion when the brain is running under full pressure, and send down the fountain and a glass of Coca-Cola. Right, so again, it makes me wonder what ingredients we're using today, and then in the future we'll be like, oh, maybe we shouldn't have done that, right? We do have much more oversight than we did in the past. So as I mentioned, it does its effects by increasing dopamine in the brain, specifically after the dopamine is released in the brain. Cocaine prevents neurons from reabsorbing the dopamine, thus increasing the amount of time the dopamine is in the synapse, producing its effects. So in some ways, it's a little bit like an SSRI, basically, but for dopamine. And dopamine is a neurotransmitter that causes feelings of pleasure, euphoria, and arousal. So the abundance of dopamine in the synapse of the neurons prolongs and increases those pleasurable feelings. High doses of cocaine can lead to what's called cocaine-induced psychotic disorder, where the user will display psychotic features, something like schizophrenia. They'll hallucinate, have delusions, but it's all because of the cocaine use. As the effects of the cocaine wear off, the person experiences what's called a crash. When this occurs, the person feels depressed. They might also experience headaches, dizziness, they might pass out. And in extreme versions, they may sleep into a deep sleep or even a coma. So again, not great. All right. And this is a little bit about the economics of cocaine.
This society, this world, money makes the world go round.
Every war is also a business, and the war on drugs is no different. The global illicit drug trade is worth an estimated $500 billion per year. That's around 1% of all global trade. And no drug is more linked with money in the popular imagination than cocaine.
This particular money is going to a Spanish firm. There's a lot of money generated at street level through cocaine.
But where does that money go? Who's spending it and who's making it? The coke business generates extreme violence at every stage of its production and distribution. But why? Why does this one product seem so uniquely connected with violence and warfare? In this show, we're following the money. How does the cocaine industry actually work? Why does it function in the way it does? And who bears the responsibility? The three biggest cocaine producing countries are Colombia, Peru, and Bolivia.
So this is where the process of making cocaine all starts. These guys come down here to the farms at the crack of dawn before it gets too hot, bind their fingers in fabric, and literally rip the leaves off the trees. This activity is going on at this time every day, all across this region.
Somos pobres, sembramos, vendemos la hojita para mantener nuestro hogar y nuestros hijos educarlos.
Nothing so far exactly screams multi-billion-dollar industry. The average coca picker can make up to about $50 a week, supporting their families with daily back-breaking labor. But poverty and rough working conditions are hardly the only things these farmers have to worry about.
El terreno es esto de ellos, pero la pista es clandestino. Por ley esto se va a inhabilitar, vamos a detonar.
This looks like they damaged the landing strip, but they are just using this to put more explosives inside and just blow the whole place up. So no wonder why the native community is not happy about this.
The US has poured billions of dollars in military aid into the war on drugs in Latin America. For 2019 to 2020, Congress has approved $418 million in aid to Colombia alone, to suppress coca and maintain peace efforts with the left-wing rebel factions who use the drug to finance their wars. Each year, militaries across the region pull up thousands of hectares of coca fields by hand.
Acá llegó el ejército y nos radicó estas maticas que nosotros sobrevivimos de ellas. Y vea, esto es trabajo de hace 2 años que yo sembré esto y ya quedó perdido.
But for decades, governments would destroy crops by spraying them with the herbicide glyphosate. This stopped in 2013 when the Colombian government had to pay Ecuador $15 million in compensation for the severe health problems the chemical spraying was causing families along the border. To make a kilo of cocaine takes about a ton of coca leaves. Prices obviously fluctuate, but a ton of coca leaves off the farm costs roughly $400. From the fields, the leaves are transported to labs hidden deep in the jungle, where they're converted into cocaine paste. A kilo of raw paste generally goes for somewhere between $700 to $900, around double the price of the raw leaves. The alkaloid paste is then transported to another lab, where it's mixed with even more lovely chemicals, turning it into pure, finished cocaine. And this is the moment where everything changes. The moment the product passes from producer to distributor, and something unbelievable happens. That kilo of pure coke that was worth $900 in the South American jungles becomes worth roughly $20,000 by the time it hits the US. And that's just wholesale. By the time that kilo has been cut by dealers and broken up into single grams to sell, it can fetch around $150,000.
Again, the people grow the leaves.
$400 to 150 grand is a pretty wild markup for any product. And that price jump is pretty much the key to the whole cocaine business. Because the product is illegal, those coca farmers and jungle lab techs can't sell it straight to consumers. The real profit lies in transporting it from the fields of South America to users around the world. Since Pablo Escobar in 1970s Colombia, The international cocaine trade has been run by cartels, and since the 1970s, those cartels have been getting more and more violent.
Encontró a un agente de la policía municipal ejecutado. Prácticamente le cortaron la cabeza. Aquí hay tejido, mira, todavía.
That's his brain.
Hey.
Oh man, really?
In Mexico, there were over 34,000 murders in 2019. In the first half of 2020, there have already been over 17,000. That's roughly one person being murdered every 15 minutes. And one of the root causes of this violence is that when drugs are illegal, gangs will fight to control their supply.
What governments have done by prohibiting drugs is they have created a perpetually growing violent market where police remove one dealer at any level, at street level, cartel level, wherever in the world, there almost always follows violence to compete for that market share. So over time, this market growth has meant a growth in violence.
How old are you guys?
Yo tengo 27.
13. I mean, do you want to be one of those people? Have to kill people?
No, padre, sí.
Ya veo lo que quiere ver el muchacho.
Mexican drug trafficking to the US is estimated to be worth between $19 and $29 billion a year. The Sinaloa cartel alone turns over more than $3 billion. And this money doesn't just buy gold-plated guns and hippos for drug lords' private zoos. It's used to pay off the police, the military, and the government. Many experts say that in Mexico, there isn't a single level of government, from local traffic police to the president's office, that hasn't been corrupted by narco money, to the point where the state and the narcos can become almost indistinguishable.
Todo esta área de nosotros.
This is so far away from any city. Do the police ever come by here?
Así han llegado a venir, pero solo pasan por caminos y uno ya mismo, pues muchas veces le da dinero uno, otra vez piden solo comida, otra vez quieren mujeres y eso. Que si ellos vienen en buen plan, pues nosotros en buen plan, nosotros cooperamos con ellos. Y si ellos vienen en modo agresivo contra nosotros, pues nosotros nomás repelemos la agresión.
Who really controls Mexico? Is it the authorities or is it the cartels?
Pues el gobierno. El cartel llega hasta donde el gobierno quiere. El gobierno es el verdadero jefe. La mayoría de las ganancias van a dar a ellos, a los altos mandos del gobierno.
When guys with automatic weapons are sitting on mountaintops telling you that the government is the real cartel boss and taking most of the profits, you know your drug policies are probably not in a great place. But with that $400 to $150 markup, it's sort of inevitable. But who's paying for all these 150 grand kilos of coke? We've seen the producers and the distributors, but who's actually consuming this stuff? There's probably as much misinformation peddled about the Western cocaine market as about any other aspect of the war on drugs. And that's a crowded field. The idea that so many politicians seem to have is that this is still some sort of drug of the elite, only taken by famous actors, media types, and the occasional member of parliament.
They have their organic food, they boast about buying fair trade, and at the same time, they're ordering Class A drugs.
Is it fair to say, Commissioner, that some of these middle-class dinner parties that send out for cocaine, they've actually got blood on their hands?
I think anybody who is seeking recreational, in inverted commas, drugs, particularly Class A drugs, yes, I think that is a good way to put it. I do.
But that is astonishingly out of touch, based on stale pop culture cliches from the 1980s. The truth is, cocaine is pretty much everywhere.
But we're working class, you know, we're not too comfortable, but we do all right, you know, we don't ask for much, you know, we just go to work, you know, we spend time with each other and with the family and do all the things that families do. And if people realised just how much coke is in this country, what corners of it actually reaches, then people might just be a little bit less judgmental over the people that use it.
976,000 people used powder cocaine in England and Wales in 2019. If cocaine was a British company, it would be bigger than Boots or EasyJet. In 2016, 1.9 million Americans reported using coke in the past month. This goes way beyond Wall Street bankers and the Hollywood elite. This is everyday people looking to unwind a bit and willing to take the health risks involved in using cocaine to do so. But the money still flows.
It's easy money, you know what I'm saying? It's easy money. Customers keep coming back, so I don't see why I shouldn't stop doing it. It's money at the end of the day.
Economics drives everything about cocaine, from the jungles of South America to nightclub toilets across.
So that gives you an idea of, why people are selling this thing that can kill people, right? There's good money in it. And the poor people all along it. And again, as the dealer said at the end, they keep coming back. This is highly, highly addictive. And so once you've started it, a lot of people have a hard time, stopping at any way, shape, or form. Regular use of cocaine, like any other substance, can lead to use disorders. In the past, the effects of cocaine were limited because of its high cost, but as they said there, now people get access to it more readily. So we're seeing more of the cocaine use disorders. Also, the strength of the cocaine has gotten more powerful through different techniques and procedures like freebasing. This is a technique in which pure cocaine is chemically separated from the processed cocaine through vaporization, so the drug is then more powerful. Millions more people use crack. So crack cocaine. This is a type of freebase cocaine that's produced by boiling cocaine down to crystalline balls. It's called crack because it makes a crackling noise when you inhale it. And it tends to be sold in small quantities at low cost. And this, like freebasing, like it just being more readily available, has led to epidemics among people who could not have previously afforded cocaine, like you saw these working class folks in the last video, people in poor urban areas as well. The really weird thing about crack versus freebasing cocaine is it's become like racially segregated, where they're like, oh, crack is done by people of color and cocaine is done by white people, but it's all mixed up together. And it's who, unfortunately, gets addicted to it and who has access to it. And granted, it's a bit ago now, but in the early 2000s when I was in college, I was an RA, and one of the things that we found when we did health and safety inspections was cocaine. Like it was an issue on my liberal arts campus, right? So we could see it anywhere. So what are the dangers? Well, what we see is it's linked to violent behaviors, not only what we saw with the drug cartels, but people who become addicted to it will kind of do anything to get it. So they will rob, steal, kill for the drug. It can lead to risky sexual behavior in which people exchange sexual favors for the drug when they can't afford it. And in addition to behavioral problems, cocaine has physical side effects that are negative, particularly with overdose. So while cocaine first causes the respiratory center of the brain to speed up, in excess doses, it acts like a depressant, very similar to the depressants. It can cause breathing to stop. And the heart beats erratically and rapidly when you're under the influence of cocaine. So the heart is forced to work harder to pump blood through the body. But the weird thing about stimulants of any kind is they are what are called vasoconstrictants. So that means that they make your veins, arteries sort of contract in on themselves. So now you have higher blood pressure going through smaller spaces, right? So when a greater abundance of blood rushes through the smaller area, you're more likely to experience things like a heart attack, heart issues, even a stroke. If you use this while pregnant, unfortunately, you're more likely to miscarry or have a stillbirth. But unfortunately, if that child is born alive, it's more likely to have immune abnormalities. So it'll be more susceptible to disease and infection. It may have attention and learning deficits that'll show up when it goes to school. Thyroid problems in children have been linked to mothers using cocaine while pregnant. And there are babies who are just born addicted, where they have abnormal levels of serotonin and dopamine in the brain, which we've learned throughout the semester can lead to all kinds of psychological issues. All right, so that's cocaine. The second type of stimulant I want to talk about are amphetamines. And yes, amphetamines include methamphetamines. So meth is a huge issue, particularly in the South, Southeast. when I was on my residency for whatever, Charlotte, North Carolina was like the meth capital of the US. Don't know why, but it was. So amphetamines are stimulant drugs and they're manufactured in laboratories. But kind of like you saw with the cocaine folks, it doesn't mean laboratory in the way we think of, like well-regulated laboratory, right? It's someone's basement or out in the jungle or what have you. An RV for those of you who were Breaking Bad watchers, right? So when amphetamines are taken in small doses, they increase energy and alertness and reduce appetite. Because they increase alertness, athletes have actually used amphetamines as a way of enhancing their performance. And because they decrease appetite, they're one of the primary ingredients in diet pills. So we talked about this when we mentioned it in the eating disorder chapter. More weight loss, faster weight loss, energy to burn. It's because you're taking an amphetamine. And when they're taken in large doses, they'll produce a rush similar to cocaine. And so there'll be intoxication and also psychosis. So again, people may hallucinate or experience cognitive distortions as a result of taking the drug. Again, these have been used in the past in very conventional ways. You see an ad for a diet pill here, victim of overeating and oversitting. And then one that again was for these poor women that they couldn't figure out why they were upset because they just weren't intellectually stimulated. Lady out of the duck. Here we have a video about someone who is a meth user.
I did drugs for many, many years. I did methamphetamine, which sounds horribly bad, but I did that for years.
And I like some of these videos because she just looks like a soccer mom, right? Like this is not the stereotype you see in your head when you see meth users. Like substances affect everyone.
It brought a life of nothing but just disaster everywhere. It's just like having a bomb exploding everywhere. You can't just do drugs and be okay. I am Tony D. Colon, and I am a landscape photographer. I had a life-changing experience when I had my grandson. When I first held him and looked in his face, looked in his eyes, and thought to myself, if it wasn't for me, this child wouldn't be here. So it's time to change. So what I did was I decided to put all that down, and ever since then, I've taken up photography. I only shoot with my iPhone. I started with an iPhone 5, now I have an 8. I've heard the 11 is the best, but I haven't moved up to that yet. My rehab was actually just getting out and walking. I was extremely overweight. I'm still overweight, but I mean, I was even more. So I think that a lot of times exercise, gets your blood moving to your brain, where you thought you would be depressed, the depression, everything kind of just opens up and you see life in a different way. I used to read about methamphetamine and that it can cause depression if you quit, and that I just prayed. I was just like, please, just don't let me go back to that life. I just have no desire to go back to that. I'm hoping and praying that maybe if somebody sees me sometime, and they see that my life has changed for the better. It's not perfect. It's definitely not perfect, but it gives me the skills to be able to be thankful. We are at Circle B Bar Reserve. It's in Lakeland.
So now it's more of an ad for this place. But yeah, I mean, you hear, I'm sure she had more support than just walking, right? But getting back to sort of your normal life, for her, it was seeing her grandson being born and, just reconnecting with the life she wanted to lead. I'm gonna start turning this on in between the videos because it's making me sleepy. So I don't even know how you all are listening to me drone on. So, for a lot of folks that kind of need that wake up call. Right, whether it's a family member, whether it's an intervention like the show, whether it's something horrible happening like them being in a car accident while they're intoxicated. right? Then it's a hard road and it's hard to quit these drugs. And you heard her mention that, you know, when people stop taking the drug, one of the things that can happen is they plunge into a deep depression. And they can experience the same sort of extended sleep symptoms that you experience with cocaine, which again can be scary. So amphetamines work by increasing dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine in the brain. And all of those have pleasurable, energizing effects. Tolerance builds up pretty darn quick, which increases users' likelihood of becoming dependent on the drug again pretty quickly. So, for example, people who use amphetamines to reduce their appetite and lose weight may find that they start to become hungry even when they take the drug. So then they increase their dosage of the drug to receive the same effects again. And so for this reason, people can even get addicted to over-the-counter weight loss pills if they include amphetamines. About 1.5% to 2% of the population in the US becomes dependent on amphetamines at some point in their lives. All right, this is always the one that throws people off. Yes, it's hard to do, but you can in fact become dependent on caffeine. And actually, the severe health effects are hard to do, but like some of the other ones, not as much. So caffeine is actually the most widely used stimulant in the world. People in the US alone consume 30 million pounds of caffeine annually. It stimulates the central nervous system, and like the other stimulants, it causes an increase in dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine, which again make you feel good. It causes an increase in psychomotor, psychosocial arousal, physiological arousal, and motor activity, and it reduces feelings of fatigue, even though it doesn't actually reduce fatigue. It can also interfere with sleep and sleep hygiene. So for example, it depends on when you go to bed, obviously, but some studies have suggested you shouldn't actually drink caffeine after 12 noon if you don't want it to interfere with your sleep. Certainly, depending on your level of caffeine use, that might not be an issue for you, right? But for people who are not heavy users, that can actually be a thing. It increases your rate of breathing, and it also increases the gastric acid secretions in the stomach. And this is why some people who are heavy caffeine users develop acid reflux and things like ulcers, not only in the stomach, but in the esophagus. You can, in fact, become intoxicated on coffee or caffeine in general. So basically, it's more than 2 to 3 cups of coffee, and the caffeine intoxication you may have experienced before and not even realize it. It's when you get kind of jittery, restless, you could feel nervous, anxious, your stomach might be disturbed, twitching, feel like you can't sit still, and feel like your heart is racing. And again, very hard to get here. You'd have to drink 100 cups of coffee within a short amount of time, but you can actually get grand mal seizures and respiratory failure at those very, very high levels. And again, those sound ridiculous until you start to think about some of the energy drinks that exist today, right? And like one energy drink is probably going to be fine, right? But if you drink 10 in a day, you might be pushing some of these health risks, right? And so again, this is a dramatized one, but something that legit happened to a young
South
teenager.
Carolina family is mourning after their child died suddenly last month.
16-year-old Davis Kripe collapsed in a classroom after investigators say he consumed too much of one substance, but it wasn't drugs or alcohol.
Julianne Pixoto explains how his family is hoping others can learn from their son's tragic death.
A coroner concluded that Davis Kripe died of a caffeine-induced cardiac event. We spoke to a local expert about the dangerous impacts too much caffeine can have on a person's heart.
April 26th began like any other Wednesday for 16-year-old Davis Kripe. Around 12:30, he left school to buy a latte at a nearby McDonald's. After that, he drank a Diet Mountain Dew and an energy drink. 2 hours later, Kripe collapsed at school. He was pronounced dead at a local hospital an hour later.
Like all parents, we worry about our kids as they grow up. We worry about their safety, their health, especially once they start driving. but it wasn't a car crash that took his life. Instead, it was an energy drink.
Kripe's autopsy showed nothing out of the ordinary. No undiagnosed heart conditions, no drugs or alcohol in his system, just the 3 caffeinated drinks.
I stand before you as a broken-hearted father and hope that something good can come from this. Parents, please talk to your kids about the dangers of these energy drinks.
We spoke to Dr. Jason Hack at Rhode Island Hospital, who said in a statement, in overdose, caffeine's stimulant effects become pronounced and can have wide-ranging effects on the body, particularly the nervous system and the heart, including seizures and cardiac arrhythmia. The death of this young man in South Carolina seems to be a tragic accident, and I hope that parents of teens will talk with their children about the potentially dangerous effects of a seemingly harmless substance that's available at every turn. Like many things, safety or injury depends upon the amount of exposure. The Food and Drug Administration says 400 milligrams of caffeine a day is safe for most adults, but only recommends 100 milligrams for adolescents 12 to 18 years old. I'm Julianne Pixoto, Eyewitness News.
And so that kid consumed a lot more than 100 grams.
South Carolina.
Right? So, but again, I don't think that what he consumed was necessarily that out of the ordinary for a lot of people, right? I'm gonna have a Starbucks and maybe a soda and then, an energy drink. So you just never know. And, again, he didn't have any sort of pre-existing heart conditions. So yeah, just be cautious. You can get withdrawal from caffeine, again, even if you're using it what feels like normal levels. So if someone consumes their usual amount of caffeine for 2 days and then consumes no caffeine for 2 days, then you can get withdrawal. And these symptoms include headaches, depression, anxiety, and fatigue. So my husband is a probably moderate caffeine user because he has to get to work at like 6:20 in the morning. And one summer, when sort of work slowed down, he was like, I'm gonna just stop drinking coffee. And he got like migraine level headaches. So it certainly can happen. To again, even people who are sort of modest users, he had like 2 cups of coffee a day. All right, nicotine is another one that like it's kind of in our consciousness, but we don't think of as being as bad. But nicotine is another common stimulant. About 25% of all Americans over the age of 12 do regularly smoke tobacco. And smoking, as we all know, is tied to a whole bunch of different health effects. So high blood pressure, heart disease, lung disease, and cancer, I think are the clearest ones. Stroke. In particular, there have been some really scary stories about people who take like birth control and smoke, and they can have a stroke at a pretty young age. And then people who smoke while pregnant have a higher chance of delivering premature and underweight babies, probably because of the stimulant effects. Nicotine, like other stimulants, excites the central nervous system. It has also been shown to be at least as addictive as heroin. I'm going to say that one again, because this usually throws people off. Nicotine has been shown to be at least as addictive as heroin. So this is why if you have family members who keep trying to quit and go back, it is legitimately hard to quit, right? Because it's as addictive as heroin. And this is why I have family members who, diabetes, other things they shouldn't, no one should probably be smoking, but on top of that, and it's, again, problematic. This one always cracks me up, that they used to market cigarettes for asthma. I don't know if anyone else in here is asthmatic. I am. Sounds like the worst idea ever to me, right? It just doesn't sound like it would be a good idea. Regular smokers do develop a tolerance to nicotine, and this is why you'll see people smoke more and more and more. So someone might start off by smoking a cigarette or 2 a day and work their way up to smoking a pack or 2 a day, right? And it's also been argued that cigarette companies place other chemicals in cigarettes that make them even more addictive than just nicotine alone. When people go through withdrawal from nicotine, they're typically experiencing symptoms like irritability. Because it's a stimulant, it does appetite suppress. So when you stop, your appetite goes up. People often gain weight. Also because your metabolism slows down. And often you have sleep disturbances, cognitive difficulties, and obviously a powerful desire to smoke as well. Now, one thing I've been asked about in recent years is, well, what if you vape instead? And we just don't have the good research on it yet. If what you're vaping has nicotine, a lot of these same things are going to come into play, right? And I would say, I guess, just like make sure you know what you're vaping. Because a lot of times, particularly with cigarettes, vapes, there's a lot of stuff mixed in there and you just want to make sure it's. And also, anytime you smoke anything into your lungs, it's potentially lung damaging. All right, so.
Viewer discretion is advised.
It's about a woman who's trying to quit.
Lung illnesses that could be linked to vaping.
It took 2 days for my lungs to fail. I almost died.
Vaping in teenagers is something that is causing harm to our kids. We want that
Okay,
message.
this is anecdotal about vaping. Again, we just don't have good hard science yet because it's so new to know what the long-term effects are.
Should be loud and clear.
My name is McCall Mirabella, and I am addicted to nicotine. I started vaping freshman year of high school, and I stopped when I turned 19. So basically a little over 4 years.
Teenagers are vaping nicotine and marijuana at higher rates than ever before.
To all of you mothers and fathers out there who think, not my kid, this is your PSA. Yes, your kid.
January of 2022, I asked my friend if he wanted to quit nicotine with me. The truth is, practically my whole friend group is addicted to nicotine. Vaping is as common as teen drinking in my world. One of my best friends, Sean, doesn't vape, and he ended up betting me and 7 of my friends $3,000 each if we could quit nicotine until January 1st of 2023. If you've never been addicted to anything before, this probably sounds like a really good idea and an easy way to make cash. But addiction is a disease, one that shows you the ugliest parts of yourself. But we haven't gotten there yet.
Let's like actually do this shit, yo. I'm so excited actually.
Is it 12?
Yeah.
It is? That was my last hit. We got this.
Good luck, Mickey.
Big baller. I already want to hit it again.
Just like that, the challenge had begun.
Guys, we're 4 minutes in.
No,
what's going on?
Since day one, I've told Sean and all of my friends that quit with me if I could make it to December, I was going to donate the money. And I'm doing that because I want to prove that I'm quitting for myself. Make sure you subscribe to see if I make it until December. Fingers crossed. I know I will be able to.
Common nicotine withdrawal symptoms: nicotine cravings, anger, frustration, and irritability, difficulty concentrating, insomnia, restlessness, anxiety, depression, hunger, or increased appetite.
I had no idea what was coming.
I'm gonna whisper because I don't want my roommates to hear me. I'm 10 hours in, and this shit is hard. I was having like a laugh attack, and like my hands were really shaky, my leg was shaky. I don't know why the fuck I'm crying. I don't know, I feel weird. You're gonna be really disappointed in me.
I'm gonna be disappointed?
Yeah.
I am. Why?
Yeah. Okay, I never stopped hitting nicotine, and so I've been addicted for like 4 years. And so as of yesterday, I tried to quit. I'm trying to quit, and it's really hard. But I'm having a really hard time, but I really do want to quit. I need support right now.
6:34 p.m. They have officially lost their mind.
That's a wrap on day 2. That was so hard. Day 3. I really feel like I'm about to cave, just give up. Right now I'm in a very irritable, bad mood. There's like an angel on my shoulder saying, don't hit it. And then the devil's like,
why? Why shouldn't we hit it? We're young, our lungs will heal.
I think the most important thing right now is keeping busy. This is so hard. I feel like I'm at war in my body. My throat hurts, my head hurts, I'm craving it. I'm really hungry. I'm fucking crying.
You're probably wondering why I'm putting myself through this. Maybe being addicted isn't so bad after all. I mean, where does one find the motivation to quit? I was thinking about the life I want to live, but I was discouraged by how much of my life revolved around nicotine. I want to have healthy lungs. I don't want to be estranged with tubes by the age of 40. The damage vaping can cause our lungs terrified me. But I'm not the only one being affected by nicotine. It's an epidemic.
8 teenagers have been hospitalized with severe lung damage in just the past month, and doctors suspect vaping is to blame.
The Surgeon General has declared it an epidemic.
This child almost died from this. 8 deaths in the US reportedly linked to e-cigarettes.
Lung illnesses that could be linked to vaping.
It was a scary thought for anybody. They had no idea how to treat it either.
He had to relearn to walk.
It took 2 days for my lungs to fail, and I almost died.
No amount of usage is healthy. A lot of people say they vape just for social events. It doesn't work like that. Most people don't even know the true hold it has on them until they try to quit. I mean, that's what happened to me.
This is really hard. Every time I have a little fidget episode.
And so like this video is in there if anyone is curious, but I wanted to just show you the part where you see how hard it is just in those initial steps to quit, right? Because nicotine is so addictive. And yeah, again, like we don't know the long-term effects, but we are seeing, again, obviously not everyone who's vaping, but certainly a small minority, scary minority who are dying as a result of it. And again, I think a lot of it has to do with like what you're vaping. There's been some evidence that some not well put together vapes or cartridges lead to you inhaling heavy metals, and like that's not good to just put in your lungs, right? Things like that. Oh, that's the thing outside. I'm always thinking it's our speakers acting up. All right, we also know that there are other legal stimulants that people take, like Adderall. So these are actually prescribed for people with ADHD. If you don't understand the mechanism, people are like, why are you giving a stimulant to someone who's hyperactive? Well, what these actually do in folks with ADHD is they work to stimulate the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain that does things like help you organize, help you inhibit certain behaviors, help you focus. And so it's usually prescribed for folks with ADHD, but 1 in 5 college students take it and not all of them are prescribed it, right? In fact, when I was on my placement year, my 4th year of grad school, we collaborated pretty closely with the psychiatry residents, and they actually had to monitor their patient stimulant use pretty closely, because if the patients were continually running out before the month was done, that meant either they were taking more than they were supposed to, or they were selling it, right? So they had to really watch that because they couldn't be complicit in that, or they could risk their licenses. And there is a risk of sudden death. So particularly people with heart abnormalities have died suddenly after taking a stimulant like Adderall. Other risks are pretty similar to other stimulants. So stroke, heart attack, hypertension is the fancy word for high blood pressure. Again, psychosis at high levels, seizures, and aggressive behaviors. So I don't know how much of an issue this still is, but I know like around the turn of the century, which might be really old to say, but around the year 2000, it was actually pretty popular, especially in affluent communities, for parents to pay off psychiatrists to write prescriptions for their kids who didn't need it, so that they would be able to focus and study more for the SAT and get higher scores. All just very simple. And here is a clip from the doctor.
I am struck, Dr. Sportelli, by Jennifer's account that hairdressers were handing them out, managers handing them out. But because they come in a bottle with a prescription or a doctor's name on it, everyone feels like this is no big deal. And I guess I can understand why it's more pervasive in the entertainment industry, or any field similar to that. Is there a reason why these fields in particular are rampant with abuse?
Yeah, so think about it, guys. Adderall and stimulants, they're meant for people that have a deficit, right? Attention deficit. So there's people that have a problem with attention and focus, and it brings them to a baseline, right? But when you take the entire culture and you change that baseline, all of a sudden the cultural baseline is, I need to be on 24/7. So all of a sudden we've taken that baseline and reset it. And now people think it's normal to take these stimulants, central nervous system stimulants, to get to that point. And that's not what they're intended for. It's incredibly unsafe to do that. And then what you're doing by doing that is you're creating this perpetuated cycle of abuse and dependence.
You know, the first time I ever went in front of the camera, what everyone came up to me and said, I was just an ER doctor. ERs are chaotic, right? But what they said was, hey, if your normal life is here, the minute that camera comes on you, take it to here.
Yeah.
You're like, well, what does that mean? And you know, the first few times you start screaming. Yeah, hey, well, like, and you're right, it's up here, and every time it's bigger, the camera dampens everything. Sure. And so I can't imagine that kind of pressure when people are, you know, handing pills to you. I was completely unaware that this could have taken your life.
Yeah.
You were in that dark of a place.
I mean, I was moments and seconds away from dying. And to see that and to know that this is happening every single day, not just in Hollywood, but all over our country, it's devastating, you know. And if I could tell you the names of beautiful faces and beautiful talents that I've literally seen die, you know, and that are dying right now, slowly dying because they're on Adderall or other drugs, because, you know, we need to fit that mold, you know, and it's like you're in a race against this person and that person. And when you realize, you know, what my gift, I'm so grateful to say, is I thought I was in a race with that person or that person. The race is against me within myself, you know. It's not about anyone else. And there's more room out there for everyone to have their space and to have their moments as well.
I think that's really important. And again, like, I never want to be like, it was good or it's still good, because it's obviously still around. But I think one of the things people have taken from the pandemic is realizing you don't have to be going all the time, right? And you could still be as functional. Like, a lot of people found they actually worked more efficiently when they worked from home and could do their laundry in between things, right? And they've heard a lot of people sort of snarking about this idea of quiet quitting, which is not a new concept. It's an old union concept called working to the rule, which is you just work to your job description and no more. And industries saying, oh my gosh, this is people slacking off, and people being like, no, I'm just doing what my job description says. And if you want me to do more, you got to pay me more, right? I think that there is a little bit of a vibe change in some industries about this. And it's interesting because even in academia, this has been controversial. And I've been really advocating that people take a second look and be like, is working to the rule actually problematic, or will those people way overworking themselves before? This is what happens when you get a clinical psychologist on your faculty, right? So now we're going to go and start talking about hallucinogens. So hallucinogens induce changes in sensory perceptions. They may strengthen normal perceptions, and they may go as far as to induce hallucinations or illusions, which are sort of like lesser hallucinations. Hallucinogens have also been known as psychedelic drugs. So if you've heard psychedelics, or you've heard like psychedelic, man, that's where it comes from. And they include drugs like LSD, mescaline, psilocybin, and ecstasy. And many of these substances come from plants or animals or fungi. That's a big thing right now, is people figuring out if microdosing with hallucinogenic mushrooms might actually be beneficial for mental health. And as you can imagine, it's controversial within the field, but there are people doing some very solid science on whether it could be helpful. And some of them are synthetic, so some of them are manufactured in laboratories. LSD itself is a hallucinogenic that causes what's called hallucinogen intoxication or hallucinosis. And that is marked by a general strengthening of perceptions. It also causes psychological changes and physical symptoms. People will focus on details they wouldn't normally focus on, like small bright blades of grass or pores on someone's skin. I remember, I think it was like bio class in high school. We watched a documentary about like the influence of certain substances. And there was a guy who was like, I went back to this museum And I looked at this artifact and it was just never the same shade of purple as when I was high on acid. Like, okay, dude, right? But people have these like life-changing experiences. They can experience color enhancement like that guy, or sometimes everything will take over sort of like a pink sheen or a certain color sheen for them. The illusions are things where objects seem distorted, or like it looks like inanimate objects, there we go, are breathing or changing shape. LSD produces these effects by binding to neurons that normally receive serotonin. And because serotonin is responsible partially for sight and emotion, LSD alters both of those sensations. So it's like you just turn on the hose for serotonin to full blast. I always have to tell this story. So when I took first year chem when I was in college, I had an adorable professor. I'm not very tall. He was shorter than me. Man looked like Santa Claus. And he would tell us great stories. We actually like jokingly called our chem class story time with Professor Lund, because I felt like we got more stories than chemistry, but they were about chemistry. So he told us this story about the guy who discovered LSD and its effects. And so he was like working in his lab, and then he did something you should never do if you work in a lab. He ate at his lab bench and he accidentally got some LSD in his sandwich. And so he started documenting the effects because he figured out this is what had happened. And so he kept a very careful journal, as a scientist might. And then again, you have to imagine my professor who looks like Santa Claus going, and then one day, he wasn't just kind of high, he was really tripping. And apparently this guy's last entry that day was just ha 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 ha. So the discovery of LSD. Not all science is elegant. All right, so here is a video about whether or not LSD is actually dangerous.
Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, whether that's one of the best Beatles songs of all time or just a weird song about LSD is up for debate. But what is LSD and is it actually dangerous? Hey guys, Julia here for D-News. When you hear LSD, you might think of a Beatles song or a little piece of white paper that'll take you on a trip, man. While both heralded as a mind-expanding wonder drug or derided as dangerous and triggering delusions, LSD holds some power in our collective imagination. But what is it? LSD is a derivative of ergot. If that's familiar to you, it's because ergot is a fungus that frequently grows on rye and wheat. And sometimes that's baked into bread that people eat, and some young girls start tripping on the fungus, and then suddenly the villagers decide to kill a whole bunch of people for being witches. Seriously, ergot probably caused the Salem witch trials. In small doses, ergot was used as medicine for centuries. It was used to aid childbirth, to quicken delivery, and stop bleeding afterwards. So naturally, a pharmaceutical company looked into its potential benefits in the early decades of the 20th century. One guy at the company, chemist Albert Hofmann, was tasked with isolating the compounds and trying to synthesize it by other means so that maybe it wouldn't kill you? In 1938, he tried a few variations, but not with much success. On a few animal experiments, however, he noticed that one variation, lysergic acid diethylamide 25 or LSD-25, had a strange effect on the mice. They acted excited for some reason. But still, the company didn't think much of the compound and mostly forgot about it. Hofmann, however, couldn't stop thinking about it and those excited animals. A few years later, he tried to recreate the compound, but one day while working on it, he felt a little strange. He went home and laid down, and well, he tripped the heck out. But he couldn't figure out what did it. He knew LSD could be poisonous, so he took extra precautions to avoid ingestion. So he concluded that he absorbed a tiny amount of LSD through his fingertips. Well, he made the compound and proceeded to experiment on himself for a while, and the rest.
So this is clearly before people did normal precautions like wearing gloves in the lab, right? Things that seem standard to us today weren't back then necessarily.
Is history. LSD became a centerpiece of the counterculture movement in the 1960s after the patents expired. Millions saw it as a way to expand their spiritual horizons. But soon there was a cultural and literal crackdown on any sort of drug, and LSD became illegal in 1968. Since then, it's been really difficult to study in a lab because of legal restrictions. I mean, it's hard to get funding for something that's still technically illegal. It's still classified by the Drug Enforcement Administration as a Schedule I drug, labeling it as one of the most dangerous drugs with no currently accepted medical use and a high high potential for abuse. But from early experiments and a few recent ones, we know some things about the drug. It works in a few ways. One study published in the journal Cell Press found that hallucinogens like LSD work on serotonin receptors in the brain called 5-HT2A receptors. While you might know serotonin is the feel-good drug, it actually has a number of different uses in the brain. Claire Stanford, a psychopharmacologist at University College London, thinks that serotonin helps keep a handle on perception and actually stops us from hallucinating. So by blocking the serotonin receptors in your brain with LSD, your brain just kind of loses its grip on perception. Or another idea, Andrew Sewell, a Yale psychiatrist who studies psychedelic drugs, thinks that LSD enhances some part of your perception, that such drugs lower activity in your thalamus. It sits at the center of your brain and filters your sensory information from all your nerves. Sewell thinks that by dampening down this filter, you become more aware of the information actually coming into your system. So sights and sounds become louder or brighter, and you might start seeing things you never noticed before. Or you might just start seeing things, period. But anyways, is this mind-altering drug dangerous? Well, one study published in the journal Lancet found that it's actually one of the least harmful drugs, both to the user and to others. I mean, when people do take it, they tend to be overly cautious, like being aware that there's a time and a place for it, like festivals in the middle of a desert. Well, there's no link between the drug and mental illness, according to one study published in the journal Psychopharmacology. And in fact, it might be beneficial for those who suffer from depression. But okay, before this sounds like
Yeah, so people are starting to think about microdosing with this as well, but I'm gonna let her talk about the downside.
some kind of wonder drug, there are some downsides, like bad trips, or one common charge aimed at the drug is that will induce acid flashbacks, or the idea that the drug changes a person's brain so much that days, months, or years later, you'll momentarily get the hallucinations associated with the drug, which in a recent case study published in the Israel Journal of Psychiatry led to one person developing Alice in Wonderland syndrome. No, he doesn't keep falling down rabbit holes, but he does keep seeing things and people as bigger or smaller than they really are. But on the other hand, one study
again,
published in the journal
we-
Drug
We need more research. We have done research on this in the past. There's an older woman in my church who's very eccentric, but we love her. She was actually our realtor, helped us find a great deal in our house. But when she found out I was a psychologist, she told me about, just as you all participated in studies, she participated in studies while she was in psych classes. But IRBs weren't really a thing back then, so they didn't really like monitor things ethically. So she's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure they just gave me LSD. That's what happened. And I'm like, oh man, you can't just like give that to someone, right? You have to warn them now. So yeah, it's certainly something, again, that may have some applications, but we want to, as they were saying, make sure that we do a lot of good research to make sure we're not going to harm people. Something that's similar and to not only LSD, but also has similar effects to amphetamines is MDMA or ecstasy or X. It's a stimulant with hallucinogenic effects. And it raises your mood, it gives you an energy boost, and this is why it's favored as a club drug. We'll come back to this video because I just want to like talk through some of these dangers first. Ecstasy is one of my don't ever take it drugs because of what I'm going to cover on this slide. This might be the top of my don't ever take it drugs actually. So it causes a lot of psychological issues like confusion, depression, sleep problems, anxiety, and paranoid thinking that continue for weeks after taking it. It can impair your memory and other cognitive functions. You can get physical symptoms like muscle tension, nausea, blurred vision, faintness, chills or sweating, clenching and grinding your teeth. It increases your heart rate and blood pressure like a stimulant while still giving you these hallucinogenic effects. But one of the problems is it reduces your ability to sweat. And so, if you're taking this and then going to, say a club and you're dancing, you can actually get heat stroke a lot more easily than usual. People will try to remedy this by drinking a lot of water. And so people who do ecstasy at these clubs will have like gallons of water. But because you can't sweat it out, people can actually get what's called water intoxication and get physical issues from that. And before you're like, water can't kill you, except if you're drowning. I remember when I was in grad school, there was a case where a mom was doing a radio contest to try to get her daughter like Miley Cyrus tickets or something. and they just had them drink as much water as they could, and the woman actually died from it. Anything you put in your body at a too high amount, right? Its dose effect can unfortunately kill you. Even if it doesn't kill you, you can get liver damage. And why, as a psychologist with some training in neuropsychology, I think this one is particularly sketchy, is that MDMA operates by opening up the floodgates and releasing all the serotonin and dopamine in your brain at once. So it first increases your supply of these to sort of like kick into gear, and then you have a deficit for sometimes weeks afterwards. Because in addition to dumping everything, the after effects of ecstasy are it actually interferes with your brain's ability to create more serotonin and dopamine. And as we've seen throughout the semester, having too little serotonin and dopamine can lead to all sorts of psychological issues, right? So ecstasy as a psychologist, not a great idea. Alrighty, okay, we're gonna start talking about cannabis. So cannabis is one of the ones that's sort of interesting to talk about, right? Because in some places it's legal, in some places it's not. So in Virginia, I know, is it legal to grow it, but not to take it? Is that what it is now? There's some sort of weird straddle like that. Other places it's legal, but like if you're a federal employee, you can't take it, right? So like my husband works for the federal government, and even though like it was legal in Seattle when he went there, they were not allowed to take it because part of the stipulation of their government employment is that they can have random drug tests, and it's not allowed, right? So, yeah.
You can grow it. You can't grow it one.
I think that sounds right. And like they can't be visible from the street or something like that. Yeah, yeah. The reason that resonates with me is I'm from Michigan originally, and I'm pretty sure that's how their law first came into place too, is they started with you can grow it. Which brings up a story from my mind. So my mom was a hippie, and my grandmother was like, came over on the boat as a child from Poland. So good little, Roman Catholic girl. And my mom was growing pot in her closet. And my grandmother told her just what a pretty plant it was. She had no idea, my poor Polish grandmother. But yeah, so it's really interesting because again, some places it's totally legal now. Places like Colorado that have legalized it are making a lot more in tax dollars from it. There've also been some really funny stories where like Girl Scouts will set up their cookie booths across from dispensaries and rake in the dough, right? Because everyone gets the munchies. So this is one that I like, I'm not going to tell you never use it or something like that. What I will say is what I said when I was talking about nicotine, that smoking anything is not necessarily good for your lungs, but edibles don't have the same effects. So just don't go telling people Dr. Mara says it's okay to eat pot, but it's the safer way, right? So these are produced from the hemp plant, and there are two primary types, marijuana and hashish, and each of those have multiple derivatives, yeah. Where depending on how you breed and crossbreed the plants, it can have totally different effects. So they create, cannabis is really interesting because it has a mix of hallucinogenic, depressant, and stimulant effects. So it's kind of like everything we've talked about so far rolled into one pretty plant, according to my Polish grandmother. So the active ingredient is tetrahydrocannabinol. There we go. And it is THC. So when you see someone talking about THC, that's what it is. So the greater the THC content, the more powerful that particular drug. Hashish contains more THC. And so it's thought of as one of the more powerful cannabis drugs. Marijuana tends to have smaller portions, but again, it depends on sort of how you crossbreed the plants and places where it is legal, and there are dispensaries, there are a whole variety. There was a show on for a while. It was Morgan Spurlock, the guy who did Super Size Me, where he ate McDonald's for 30 days. He did a show with, I think, CNN, where he did other stuff for just like trying, not necessarily 30 days, but he worked at a dispensary for a while. It was really interesting to see the behind the scenes and like how careful they regulated they have to be, because when it's legal, it's regulated, right? So it's like food grade level health code standards in terms of the growing and the dispensing. And in some places, it's legal to take if you have like medical conditions. In other places, it's just legal now. So it'll be interesting to see how this sort of like plays out over the next few years. Because again, I think a lot of places are gonna look at the taxes that places like Colorado are getting and thinking like, this might help our economy. So again, yeah. I think it's like CBD. Good question. I don't actually know the distinction with CBD. Let's do a Google. Because I know that is a thing and I know it's related, but it's not the same. Here we go. So CBD is just the cannabidiol, I guess. Ooh, this is from a recovery center. They're both found in the cannabis plant. CBD is not psychoactive, but it does have medicinal properties. THC is the psychoactive chemical ingredient. Thank you for asking me to look that up because I've never actually known the distinction myself. And again, marijuana contains both. And so like in places like Virginia, it's legal to sell stuff with CBD, but not THC, right? So like, yeah, it's interesting to sort of think about. And this is, we've known about the medicinal properties for quite some time. This one is fun because this was a cough sedative. And now that I think about it, this is like this brand name still sells cough meds, although very much dramatically changed on it, and like specifically markets them as being like accessible to people with high blood pressure, which is interesting. But yeah, so we have codeine in there, cannabis, white pine bark, wild cherry, stuff that doesn't sound that scary, and then chloroform. Again, dose response, right? So I like that it was available in gallons. Go for it. All right, we will end there today and pick up and talk more about marijuana dependence and abuse, which is so funny because we had an argument with one of our professors in grad school about whether that was a thing. We're like, it's literally in the DSM, so it's a thing, but he didn't believe it. So we'll talk about that on Tuesday. Again, Thursday, meet at the Cove for the talk about puppy raising and how that relates to physical and mental health. And if you can attend the talk right beforehand in Blocker with the veteran with his service talk.